Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to all. Thank you for joining us today. My name is Nidhi Barot. I am the Marketing Communication Specialist for our health business of Lubrizol Life Science. I welcome you to our Enabling Differentiated Oral Suspension webinar. I'm going to quickly take you through the WebEx controls because some of you may be new here. You will see the slide initially on the left-hand side of your screen. You can choose the layout options by clicking on it so that you have a full screen option. The slide that you see on your screen right now, you are requested to keep the number 1 and number 2 option on mute. The number 3 option, you can use that to communicate us if you're not able to hear us for any other communications. Option 4, the 3 dots that you see, take you to the Q&A box, which can help you pour in your questions if you have any throughout the session. We also have an interesting poll, which you can reach from by clicking on the option 4. The option 5 will help you exit the webinar at the end of the session. I would encourage you all to participate in the polling session for the webinar. I will quickly give you a small introduction on Lubrizol Life Science Health. At Lubrizol Life Science Health, we partner with customers to speed their innovative medical devices, nutraceutical, oral care, and differentiated pharmaceutical products to market. We have our dedicated team providing best-in-class polymers and excipients, and today we are going to focus on our range of Carbopol polymers. We also offer contract development and manufacturing services for complex pharmaceuticals. Our panelists for today are Kedar Chiklikar, who is currently the Associate Head Technical Services and Applications for South Asia Middle East. He has industrial experience spanning more than 25 years, worked in leading Indian and MNC manufacturing firms in various capacities in formulation, development, documentation, regulatory, technology transfer, and product launch activities. He has more than 15 years of experience in the excipient field in business development, pharmaceutical laboratory setup, technical services, regulatory, polymer application development, and training areas. Leading the Q&A today are Dr. Vijay Ahire and Dr. Pankaj Pathak. Dr. Vijay Ahire is Senior Account Manager responsible for India and Middle East region. Doctor has completed his M.Pharm from College of Pharmacy, Nashik, and PhD from MS University of Baroda. He has over 17 years of experience in pharmaceutical industry. Dr. Pankaj Pathak, presently working with Lubrizol Life Science for more than 3 years now as account manager, looks after India, Bangladesh, and Pakistan region. Pankaj has earned his PhD in pharmaceutical technology from Bombay College of Pharmacy. He has over 10 years of experience in pharmaceutical and excipient industry. I once again welcome you all and request Mr. Chiklikar to start with our enabling differentiated oral suspension session for today.
Hello, good afternoon, good evening, good morning to all the participants. Thank you, Nidhi, for the nice introductions. So we are going to talk about the applications of Carbopol polymer in oral suspension formulation. The overall outline for today's webinar is I'm going to talk about chemistry, regulatory overview of excipients. I'm going to talk about oral suspension applications in which we'll cover swelling aspect, rheological and processing considerations. We are then going to discuss about a couple of case studies, paracetamol and draft forming suspension. At the end, I will be talking about taste masking applications of Carbopol polymers. And then we will take question and answers at the end of the webinar. As stated by Nidhi, there is a polling available to all of you throughout the webinar. Please do take time and provide the answers to the polling questions. There are 4 or 5 polling questions, which are very easy and which will help us to further shape our activities. So starting with the chemistry and regulatory aspect of Carbopol polymers. Pharmaceutical excipients, we have been dealing and using them for years altogether. You are all experienced formulators. So pharmaceutical excipients, as defined by USP, they are the substances other than active ingredients that have been appropriately evaluated for safety and intentionally included in the drug delivery system. So these two aspects about excipients are very important to understand. The appropriately evaluated for safety and intentionally included. So the safety aspect of the excipient is very important, and why they're intentionally included in the product. Excipients, as you know, are derived from a variety of sources, animal, plant, insect, synthetic, sea, some are mine. And they are also not only used in one industrial sector, but they are used in a variety of industrial sectors. Magnesium stearate, silica, in construction, and so on and so forth. So therefore, excipients are not really manufactured to one single end market, unlike API, metformin hydrochloride entirely will be getting used as tablets and getting consumed by the patients, which is not the case with excipient. And therefore, manufacturing and supply of excipients is unregulated by any agency. So you will not find typically a manufacturing license number mentioned on an excipient. So as a formulator, you have to be very careful about selecting an excipient, because there are several Me-Toos going to be there in the market. And there is, for the same excipient, there'll be a technical grade, there'll be a personal care grade, a pharma grade, this grade and that grade having different specification, different input raw materials, and also different pricing points. And this creates a lot of confusion in the market. And we have seen people getting stuck up because of selecting a wrong excipient and getting stuck up at regulatory aspect or filing, etc. So I would like all of you to be very careful about selecting the right excipient source and the right supplier. That takes us to the next question as to then when can I call my excipient a pharmaceutical grade excipient? Because there is a lot of kind of confusion on this area also. And general understanding in the industry, many times we hear, is that if the excipient complies to the monograph in the pharmacopoeia, then it is a pharmaceutical grade excipient. However, this is a very incomplete understanding of the pharmacopoeia also and of the compliance requirement also. If you look at the pharmacopoeia itself, the pharmacopoeia has got two standards. One is a vertical standard, which is the monograph, which is applicable for a particular chemical ingredient or for a particular compound. And there are general chapters and general notices, which are the horizontal standard that apply to all the monographs. Now, when you compliance to pharmacopoeia not only means compliance to a single vertical single page monograph, it also means compliance to general chapter and general notices. And the most important general chapter is the 467 residual solvent, because excipient or same chemical compound can be manufactured by different synthetic routes. Thereby, it can have different residual solvents and different impurities, which may not be present in the monograph vertical standard, because monograph is derived using the major manufacturer, the innovator. That is where there is a exchange of data between the innovator or the major stakeholder and the US pharmacopoeia, and that's how the monograph is developed. So the monograph cannot have all those things which are there, which can be present in the excipient compound. So the second compliance requirement is compliance to general chapter and general notices, and the third compliance requirement is that it should be manufactured and distributed under GMP. Again, here the GMP that we are referring to is not the Schedule M GMP or the 21 CFR GMP, but it is the IPIC PQG GMP. The IPIC PQG GMP is derived from the API GMP and the formulation GMP. However, it has been tailored to suit the excipient manufacturers. So to be able to comply as a pharmaceutical excipient, the excipient must comply to the monograph for sure. It should also comply to general chapter, general notices, and it should be manufactured and distributed under GMP. We have to remember and bear in mind that the monograph is actually designed as a quality control, a quality assurance tool for batch-to-batch checking of the lots of the formulation or of the lots of the API or the lots of the excipient. It is not a tool for characterization. So while changing over from one polymer supplier or one excipient supplier to another, just reliance on the monograph will lead to an incomplete understanding and situations which will be very complicated to solve going forward. So with this short introduction to excipients, that they are coming from variety of source, there are several grades available of the excipients, and therefore as a formulator we have to be very careful about selecting the right source of the excipient and the right grade of the excipient, such that there are no issues moving forward. With this short introduction to excipients, now I'm going to talk about carbopol polymers. Carbopol polymers are a very versatile range of polymers, and they are used in almost all the dosage form apart from injections, such as tablets and capsules. And we recently have conducted a webinar on oral solid applications of carbopol polymers. The recording of the webinar is also available. So if few of you, those who have missed that webinar and are interested, we can provide the recording to you. So applications in tablets and capsule by virtue of covalently cross-linked polymer, high efficiency, availability in powder and granular grade, global regulatory compliance, safe and effective. Topical formulations, another huge area for Carbopol polymers, and we are going to hold another webinar on applications in topical formulations, to which also I would request you to attend. So they have proven rheology modifications in gels and creams, versatile and efficient in aqueous, anhydrous, hydroalcoholic systems, effective primary emulsifiers and emulsion stabilizers. In oral suspensions and solution, which is today's topic of discussion, they have long-term stability for suspension for a wide pH range, highly efficient at low usage level, build viscosity and yield value, which I'll be discussing today, and taste masking, which is also a discussion point for today. Bioadhesion, another very large area of applications for Carbopol polymer for a variety of route of administration like vaginal, nasal, oral, rectal, and ophthalmic. Improve bioavailability, enhance patient compliance, provide excellent adhesive force, lower concentration of active ingredient are needed because of the increase in residence time of the active. So bioadhesion is another very large area for Carbopol polymers. Last but not the least, Carbopol polymers have also large application in oral care. Efficient co-binders and thickeners at low usage level, suspending agents, and thickener anhydrous and peroxide gel systems compatible with all the commonly used ingredients, and they can then interact with soft tissue as well as hard tissue enamel. So Carbopol polymer, first of all, is a very versatile range of polymer, though our basket is not very big. We have a small basket of polymer. However, the polymers have unique functionality in all the dosage form and in a variety of routes of administration apart from injections. Carbopol polymers are basically polyacrylic acid. So this is the acrylic acid, CH2CHCOH, very small molecular weight, only 72. And this acrylic acid, when it forms a polymer, it is called as a polyacrylic acid. Now this molecular weight, what you're seeing here, 603, is basically for the linear polyacrylic acid. However, Carbopol polymers are covalently cross-linked polymer. They are not linear polymer, but branched polymer. So they are derived from acrylic acid. They are all acidic in nature, all the Carbopol polymer. And whenever you put Carbopol polymers in water, you will get a pH between 2 and 3. They are derived acrylic acid, which is a petroleum byproduct abundantly available in nature. And they are synthetic polymers, which we start from monomer, and we are able to tightly control the polymerization process and the reaction such that the polymer properties are tightly controlled. We are able to provide a very tight control on viscosity and polymer properties based on our years of expertise in manufacturing these synthetic polymers. So the first distinction between Carbopol polymer and the natural or cellulosic polymers is the versatility. The second distinction is the synthetic manufacturing, because of which it provides a consistent quality. There are three categories of Carbopol polymer: Carbopol homopolymer on the left-hand side, Carbopol copolymer, and Carbopol interpolymers. Carbopol homopolymers are derived using one monomer, that is the acrylic acid monomer, and which you can see the complete backbone of the acrylic acid. And then there are covalent crosslinks, these blue crosslinks. Okay, so homopolymers are basically very hydrophilic in nature. They are covalently crosslinked. Therefore, the molecular weight of all the homopolymer, copolymer, and interpolymer, because of the crosslinking, is millions of Daltons. The cross-linking have unique functionality and unique capabilities, which I'll be discussing. They form a three-dimensional gel structure. So this is the third distinction between Carbopol polymers and the natural cellulosic polymer, which are linear polymers. So Carbopol polymers are covalently cross-linked. The first category is homopolymer, which is purely hydrophilic. And then there is a cross-linking. Second category is copolymer. The copolymers are manufactured using two monomers. First is the acrylic acid monomer, which is the complete backbone, as you can see. And second monomer is the C10 to C30 alkyl acrylate comonomer. So these two monomers form a polymer. And you can see those COOR strands, which is the second monomer strand. So when two monomers form a polymer, they call as copolymers. So this, because of the long carbon chain length, second monomer, the copolymers have both hydrophilic and hydrophobic properties. And therefore, they are used in emulsion stabilization and emulsion creams, etc., for oil and water systems. The third category is interpolymers, Carbopol interpolymers, which are homopolymers or copolymer that contain the block copolymer of polyethylene glycol and a long chain alkyl acid ester. So they are having some dispersing aid, and Carbopol interpolymers are basically very easy to disperse. And we have ETD and ultrase, which are easy to disperse and ultra easy to disperse polymers. while homopolymers and copolymers have some challenges in dispersing, which I'll be discussing during the processing aspect. The last category we have a polycarbophile. Polycarbophile is also homopolymer essentially, like this homopolymer. However, there's a unique cross-linking agent, divinyl glycol, which is used, which distinguishes it from the other homopolymers. Now, the cross-linking agent and the cross-linking density is what is going to distinguish one polymer type from the other. So we have lightly cross-linked polymer, medium cross-linked polymer, and highly cross-linked polymer in both homopolymer, copolymer, and interpolymer categories. So this table is going to, we are going to describe the entire polymer range for pharmaceutical here. So the first category of carbopol polymer, which were introduced in the 50s and the 60s, are the benzene range polymer, carbopol 934PNF, 934NF, 940NF, 941NF. And there are individual monographs in USP, carbomor 934, carbomor 934P, carbomor 940, and carbomor 941. These were introduced in the 50s and the 60s using benzene as a residual solvent, as a mother solvent. We soon realized that benzene is a carcinogenic solvent, therefore we cannot continue to manufacture in benzene. And therefore we introduced two categories of homopolymer. First is the co-solvent category, which is manufactured using a co-solvent system of ethyl acetate and cyclohexane. And we have an ethyl acetate category, which is manufactured purely using ethyl acetate. You can see the three distinct color codings here: the red coding for benzene grade, the blue coding for co-solvent grade, and the green coding for the ethyl acetate grades. Now, when we introduce the co-solvent and ethyl acetate grade polymers, we try to match two things. We try to match the numbering system, and also we try to match the viscosity. So in case of 941, which is lightly cross-linked polymer having low viscosity of 4000 to 11, we introduce 981, again ending with 1. Low lightly cross-linked polymer, same viscosity, 4 to 11,000. And we introduce 971P and 71G, which are also lightly cross-linked polymer having low viscosity, 4,000 to 11,000 CPS. So all the polymer ending with 1 are with lightly cross-linked, low viscosity, 4,000 to 11,000 CPS. Then coming to the 4 ending polymer, which are medium viscosity. So in case of 934, which is benzene grade, we introduce 5984, which is a co-solvent grade. And instead of 934P, which is a benzene grade, we introduce 974P, which is the ethyl acetate grade. So all the 4 ending polymers are medium cross-linked, having medium viscosity of 29 to 39,000. And lastly, we have the 0 ending polymer, 940NF, in place of which we introduce 980NF, which is having a high viscosity, 40,000 to 60,000. So ending with 1, ending with 4, and ending with 0. Ending with 1 are the lightly cross-linked, 4 to 11,000. Ending with 4 are the medium cross-linked, 30 to 39,000. And ending with 0 are the highly cross-linked, 940 and 980. There is no ethyl acetate version for the highly cross-linked polymers. Now, for the co-solvent grade and ethyl acetate grade, they comply to the carbomor homopolymer monograph, which is an umbrella monograph in USP, while these 4 monographs are individual monographs in USP. So this is an umbrella monograph, and there are type A, type B, and type C mentioned in the same monograph. So all the other tests are the same, only the viscosity is different. So type A is a lightly cross-linked, type B is medium cross-linked, and type C is highly cross-linked polymer. This is the umbrella monograph. Now, coming to the copolymers. Now, in case of copolymers also, the first copolymer that was introduced was 1342NF, which is polymerized in benzene, which was introduced in the same time when the 934, 934P were introduced. And there is an individual monograph, carbomor 1342. Likewise, same thing happened for copolymers. We introduced non-benzene grades, co-solvent grade. We do not use benzene. So we introduced pemolin TR1NF and pemolin TR2NF polymer. As you can see, pemolin TR1NF closely matches the viscosity of 1342. Now here we are not really bothered about the numbering system because there is only 1 or 2 polymers in this category. And there is a carbomor copolymer monograph, like a homopolymer umbrella monograph in the USP, which is again a non-benzene monograph, and to which the pemolin polymer comply. Lastly, we have the interpolymers, which were directly introduced as co-solvent. So in the interpolymer, there is no benzene version, and they are all co-solvent version manufactured using a co-solvent system of ethyl acetate and cyclohexane. We have carbopol ETD 2020NF, easy to disperse, and carbopol ultra 10NF, ultra easy to disperse, having the viscosity range as mentioned, and complying with the interpolymer monograph type A and type B. The major distinction between the carbomor homopolymer, carbomor copolymer, carbomor interpolymer monographs, and the individual carbomor monographs for benzene is in the residual benzene content. So the Carbomor 934, 940, 941 monographs have, and as well as the Carbomor 1342 monograph, they have residual benzene content in the monograph of 5000 ppm, 0.5%. 934P monograph has a residual benzene content of 100 ppm, while the homopolymer, the copolymer, and the Carbomor interpolymer monograph in USP, the residual benzene content is only 2 ppm. Also, the Carbomers monograph of EP and IP are basically only for homopolymers, and they also have a residual benzene limit of 0.2%, 2 ppm, sorry. There is no monograph in any of the pharmacopoeias for copolymer and interpolymer. The JP and the CP pharmacopoeia monograph are also for homopolymers. So the Carbomor monographs in the Indian pharmacopoeia and European pharmacopoeia stipulate limit of benzene as 2 ppm. JP and CP compliant grades, you can contact our local sales representative. Co-solvent, as I said, is a mixture of ethyl acetate and cyclohexane. And why did we, picture all the benzene grades in red? Is essentially that 934, 934P, 940, 941, and 1342 polymers are not recommended for new product development due to regulatory restrictions on benzene. So if you are using those polymers, they are not complying to IP, not complying to EP. So our recommendation is always to switch over to the co-solvent grades or the ethyl acetate grades. And the viscosities which are mentioned are all for 0.5% neutralized dispersions or for the respective concentration as mentioned in the brackets. So with this short introduction to pharmaceutical excipients and to the different types of polymers, carbopol polymers, we will now going to talk about oral suspensions. In this, I'm going to cover the swelling mechanism, thickening, and a wide range of flow properties. Suspension stabilization, we are going to discuss about rheology, thixotropy, yield value. Dispersion preparation, wherein I'm going to talk about the manufacturing methods for small scale to production scale. Then we are going to understand 2 case studies, followed by taste masking and commercial products. Now, carbopol polymer in the powder form are having very fine particle, having a particle size of 5 to 15 microns. Very fine particle, very high surface area, and which is why all the challenges what you face in dispersing the polymer, because they have a static charge also in them. So once they are hydrated, they swell to some extent, and particle size and the viscosity will gain to some extent. And when they are neutralized, they come to the maximum viscosity and the maximum swelling. So dry powder to hydrated polymer to neutralized polymer. This cycle is very important to understand. Again here, so dry polymer opens up slightly, and when you neutralize it, what happens is basically carbopol has a pK of 6, but when you put carbopol in water, the pH is only 3. So from 3 to 6, when you increase the pH using alkali, the alkali ionizes the polymer, and because of the similar charge on the backbone, COO minus, the similar charge part, molecules they repel each other, and that is how the polymer chain completely opens up, giving the full viscosity realization. So, but the dry polymer to hydrated polymer, this stage is very important to achieve, because when you add the polymer to water, 2 things are happening simultaneously. First is that the polymer is getting wetted, and secondly, the polymer is swelling, hydrating, and swelling. Okay, so but the rate of hydration and swelling is very fast for this homopolymer because of the surface area and the hydrophilicity of the polymer. So therefore, if you do not disperse the polymer quickly or correctly, what is going to happen is the external surface will wet and hydrate without allowing the internal surface to wet properly, leaving the internal surface dry like a powder, like a white speck you can see, what we typically refer to as a fisheye. And this is a little bit of a challenging situation. So hydration of the polymer should be properly performed and followed by the neutralization. The swollen polymer, basically the swollen polymer is in kind of a Donan equilibrium, because this is a semi-permeable membrane containing all the water. Inside is like a sac. And when we say carbopol polymer is a salt-sensitive polymer, what essentially happens is, if in a swollen polymer gel, if you're going to put sodium chloride from the outside, what is going to happen is that the water from inside the sac is going to ooze out, is going to ooze out by osmotic pressure because of the high ionic concentration of ions in the external side, and by way of which it will try to neutralize or balance the concentration of ions on both the sides of this semi-permeable membrane. And once the water oozes out, the gel is going to squeeze, and thereby you're going to get a loss of viscosity. So therefore, this is the swelling mechanism. One has to understand this is an ionic polymer, and therefore any disturbance in the ionic characteristics of the formulation is going to reflect in the form of viscosity loss. Looking at the viscosity and the concentration relationship, there is something called C critical, which we call the critical overlap concentration. So in a dilute dispersion, C is less than C critical, so all the swollen particles are spaced apart from each other. You will hardly get any viscosity here. When C is equal to C critical, the swollen particles are probably just touching each other, but they're not overlapping or squeezing into each other. But when C exceeds the C critical, the critical overlap concentration, the particles are going to squeeze into and overlap over each other, where we are going to get a significant increase in the viscosity. So this particular aspect must be understood. And when we are developing a formulation, the concentration of the polymer, how much should I put? If I put 0.5, 0.6, 0.2, 0.4, so try to titrate the concentration. And if you see from 0.5 to 0.6, if you see a sudden jump in viscosity, or from 0.6 to 0.7, so you should be in a plateau region where the small changes in concentration are not leading to large changes of viscosity. That is where you are going to get a stable formulation. If small changes in concentration are leading to large changes in viscosity, that means probably this critical overlap concentration is not reached, and which is why we are seeing such drastic changes, and therefore the concentration has to be optimized accordingly. Carbopol polymer, as I stated earlier, are covalently cross-linked, and that is what differentiates it from the linear polymers, the cellulosic polymer, the natural gums, etc., who are all linear polymers. And therefore, even if you take a clear hair gel from the market, and if you see under the microscope, you're going to see this kind of a honeycomb like a combination. So these are the honeycombs and interstitial spaces. So it's a heterogeneous system. And there are two viscosities for the polymer. One is a macro viscosity, which is the overall viscosity of the polymer. And another is a micro viscosity, which is the interstitial fluid viscosity of the dispersion. Okay, so these formulations are going to have two viscosities, macro viscosity and micro viscosity. And this is a very important understanding about this polymer, which you will not find this kind of honeycomb like a partition combination under the microscope for linear polymer, which are water soluble. So they will not, you cannot see anything under the microscope. So macro viscosity and micro viscosity phenomena need to be understood, which leads to plastic rheology, which I'll be discussing. So after having understood how the polymers swell, what are the factors in swelling the polymers, how the concentration is important to reach the critical overlap concentration, we will now understand what are the pH viscosity relationship. So there are two ways of swelling the polymer. One way is adding the organic or inorganic basis, which is a direct, which is the strong. I would call it a strong way of swelling the polymer. And another way of swelling the polymer, which is a weak way of swelling the polymer, the hydrogen bonding mechanism, which is a weak mechanism of swelling. So we have a strong mechanism of swelling, organic or inorganic or amino acids, and weak mechanism of hydrogen bonding. I'll be discussing about both these aspects. So basically, when we talk about aqueous dispersion, they are highly efficient at low usage level. Viscosity of the dispersion increases with polymer level. Viscosity increases at pH 4 and begins to decrease at 9. So optimally 4 to 9 is the pH range in which you can place your formulation. Maximum viscosity is typically attained at pH 7. Addition of neutralizer to aqueous dispersion results in gradual thickening. Higher levels of polymer enable reaching maximum viscosity at low pH, and so on and so forth. So these are the pH viscosity relationship: 971 PNF, 974 PNF, and Novian A1. And as you can see, there are four curves here: 0.2%, 0.5%, 1%, and 2%. Now, if you look at the 1% curve, it is 9,000 CPS viscosity, but then 2% is not 18,000, but about 14,000. So there is no direct relationship between concentration and viscosity beyond the critical overlap concentration. Now 974P likewise, if you look at 1%, it is approximately 60,000, but 2% is not 120,000, it is approximately 90,000. Okay. This is the Novion A1 for 2% dispersion, and the viscosity goes up to 60,000 CPS. So these are the pH viscosity curves. Now this is an interesting curve to understand. We have combined the 971P and 974P curves here. So bottom are the 971P, and these are the 974P curves. So as you can see, the 971P almost plateaus off at pH 5. There is not much change of viscosity from pH 5 to 6 to 7. However, for 974P, we can see this rising curve here. 5 to 6, 5 to 6 is still rising. So if you have a formulation which you have to modify at pH 5, and then if you use 974P as a polymer, so by chance your viscous pH goes for 5.4 or 4.5, you will see a drastic change of viscosity for the formulation. Okay. While in case of a plateaued formulation like 971P, between 5.5 or 5, there's not a great change of viscosity. So a stable formulation is one which is in a plateau region. Okay, and you have to identify the plateau region for your formulation. So like I said, that you titrate the concentration. For a given concentration, also titrate the pH. And if small changes in pH are leading to drastic changes in viscosity, it's an indication that the product is not in the plateau region, and therefore it might have some challenges in stability. So these are some of the quick fix tricks you can take during the DOE of titrating the concentration to be above the critical overlap concentration, and also titrating the pH to be in the plateau region. So for a lightly crossing polymer, basically for a low pH formulation, a lightly crossing polymer is to be selected. And for a high pH formulation, you can select a highly crossing polymer. If I were to include 980 NF, 980 will show even a rising core between 6 and 7 also. While 974P is kind of plateauing off beyond 6, but 980 will plateau off near 7. So that is the kind of ballpark rule. High pH, highly cross-linked. Medium pH, medium cross-linked. Low pH, low cross-linked. So that the formulations are in plateau region and you will not have challenges on stability. The second mechanism of swelling is the hydrogen bonding mechanism. And here also, because this is a weak mechanism of swelling, you may have to heat the polymer dispersion. So you can add polymer to glycerine and heat it to 60 degrees to hasten this hydrogen ion bonding mechanism. And this mechanism is allowing us to swell the polymer even at low pH, pH 3, pH 4. You can get a good viscosity using polyols like glycerine, propylene glycol, polyethylene glycol, mannitol, sorbitol. However, the concentration of this polyol must be high enough. I mean, you cannot expect just put 10% glycerine and expect that this reaction will kick in. No, a very high proportion of this polymer need to be, these polyols need to be present in the system before this reaction can kick in. Here also, because this is a weak mechanism of swelling, here you can note that if I compare the viscosity of the three polymer, lightly crossing 971P, medium crossing 974P, and the highly crossing 980NF, because there is a tendency that 980NF is high viscosity, so it might also give high viscosity in the glycerine, dispersion, which is a wrong understanding, because a highly crossing polymer needs a strong mechanism of swelling. The polymer will not swell because they are highly branched, and you need that ionic repulsion between the COO groups to swell the polymer, which is not being provided by the glycerine swelling mechanism. You can see 980NF gives a very low viscosity compared to 971P and 974P. 971P, in fact, gives a higher viscosity at 0.75%, even higher than 971-4P, and 0.5% also is higher. So lightly crossing polymer opens up quickly and gives a high viscosity. Medium crossing also is opening up here in glycerine, but highly crossing polymers are not recommended for system which are having a weak mechanism of swelling. So the polymer selection depends upon what is the pH of the formulation, what is the swelling mechanism used, and then accordingly the polymer concentration and pH has to be selected. The neutralizers which are used in this case, sodium hydroxide, potassium hydroxide, these are all the inorganic alkalis. This is triethanolamine, organic alkali, tromethamine, aminomethylpropanol. So depending upon the concentration of alcohol, if the concentration of alcohol is low, then you can go for sodium potassium hydroxide. As the concentration goes up, you have to change the neutralizer. So the choice of neutralizer depends upon the solvent system. The neutralizer must be miscible with the solvent system, otherwise there is a precipitation. And this table provides the equivalent quantity of the neutralizer for 1 gram of carbopol to neutralize to pH 6 and 7. However, for oral suspensions and solution, the only approved neutralizers sodium hydroxide and potassium hydroxide only. You can also go for ammonium hydroxide, but it is not required many times. Sodium and potassium hydroxide are good enough and they will do the job. Triethanolamine is not recommended for oral. Likewise, AMP also is not recommended for oral applications. So the three polymer which are recommended for oral suspensions and solution: carbopol 971PNF, carbopol 974PNF, Novian AAL polycarbophil, and carbopol 934PNF. But I have de-emphasized the polymer purposely because this is a benzene polymer and not recommended for any new applications. But there are some grandfathered products which contain this formula, this polymer, which is why we continue to maintain it. And the concentration typical recommended are 0.2 to 1%. You can see the high efficiency at a low usage level and compliance with all the monographs, etc. And viscosity low to medium and polymerizing ethyl acetate. So these are all the polymer which are recommended for oral applications. We are now going to talk about rheological considerations after having understood the swelling mechanism and after having understood the chemistry of the polymers. Now, let us understand the term viscoelastic here. All our careers, we deal with two states of matter, liquid and solid. So what do you mean by rheology? Now, rheology basically is a study of when I apply force to any material, what is the behavior of the material? How does the material behave? That study is a rheology study. So if I take a liquid and if I put force on a liquid, when I put force on any material, there is some deformation, change in shape of the material. So if I put force on a liquid, the only way a liquid is going to deform is that it is going to flow. So the one rheological property liquids are going to show is flow. The second rheological property liquids are going to exhibit is the resistance to the flow after applying the stress or the force. The resistance is the viscosity. So liquids are going to exhibit two rheological properties, flow and viscosity. But if you look at solids, solids display three different rheological properties. So we have solids which are deforming elastically, solids deforming plastically, and solids deforming brittle by brittle deformation. So there are three different deformations the solids are going to show depending upon the internal structure of the solid: elastic deformation, plastic deformation, and the brittle deformation. Now, when we combine liquids and solids together, this system is going to show both the properties of liquid and solids. So the one property that is going to be imparted by liquid is the viscous property, and the other property that is going to be imparted by solid is the elastic or the plastic property. So that's why semi-solid systems are viscoelastic or viscoplastic. And likewise, there are two moduluses: modulus of viscosity and modulus of elasticity. The higher the modulus of viscosity, it is more going to behave like a viscous liquid. The higher the modulus of elasticity, it is more going to behave like a elastic solid, and so on and so forth. So these are that is where the origin of the term viscoelastic comes from, and we are all dealing in semi-solid systems which are viscoelastic in nature. Looking at the rheology, as I said, rheology is a study of deformation and flow of a material when it is subject to an applied force. And viscosity or internal friction is a measure of flowing liquid to resist an applied shearing force. Now, you just take water, for example. If I put stress on water, if I push water, it will flow. If I push higher stress on water, it will flow at a faster rate. So if I put a graph of stress, that is the force I'm applying, to the rate, that is the speed at which the water is moving, I'm going to get a straight line curve, and which is a Newtonian curve. Okay, so water is a Newtonian liquid where the shear stress and the shear rate, that is the applied force and the speed, are always in direct proportion. And Newtonian liquids have same viscosity at all shear stress and all shear rate. So it doesn't matter. For example, there are silicone fluids which are used to standardize viscometers. And on these fluids, it is only mentioned viscosity of 25,000 CPS at 25 degrees centigrade. That's it. Now, all we are talking of is that 25 degrees centigrade. Temperature is 25 all the time. So 25 degrees centigrade will show 25,000 CPS viscosity. So any spindle we use, any spindle number or any RPM of the spindle you choose, it will always show 25,000 viscosity because it is irrespective of the, because it's a Newtonian fluid. And in fact, you can calibrate your viscometer using those. However, when you combine liquids and solids together, that is where the flow becomes non-Newtonian. So non-Newtonian systems, the response to applied stress is non-linear. It is not a linear response. So the viscosity is going to change as per the applied stress. It is not the same viscosity. So therefore, the selection of spindle and the selection of RPM becomes very critical while measuring the viscosity of non-Newtonian systems. So these systems are complex systems characterized by large disordered solid molecules with a tendency to reassociate and a strong interaction with the solvent. So carbopol falls in the Ellis plastic, kind of flow behavior, which will not show any flow up to a certain shear stress, and it will then show a shear thinning, flow curve. Now, because we are dealing in non-Newtonian systems, the way you take viscosity has to be perfectly understood. For a Newtonian system, because if you're manufacturing a syrup, a kind of a simple syrup solution or a solution, which is a Newtonian flow. So it doesn't matter even if you measure the viscosity at 100 RPM or 200 RPM using whichever spindle, you will always get the same viscosity. But in case of a non-Newtonian system, if you're noticed in all our examples, which if you go on our website and see all the examples what we have mentioned for topical products, even on personal care website, we always mention 20 RPM as a standardized RPM for checking viscosity. So at 20 RPM, the system is in a flowable state. It is not in a non-flowable state. Okay. So 20 RPM is fixed. 25 degrees centigrade is fixed. These two things are fixed while measuring viscosity of non-Newtonian systems. And then you have to select a spindle that gives you a torque of more than 50. Now, typically what we have seen people is they have, maybe they don't have a spindle or whatever reason, they take one spindle and they keep on increasing the RPM to achieve the higher torque and get a stable reading for the viscosity. But the more the RPM you're giving more stress. And if you're giving more stress, you're thinning the system, and we are getting a lower viscosity reading than what is the appropriate way of taking the viscosity. So always measure viscosity at 20 RPM, select the spindle, which gives a higher torque of more than 50%. So the spindle need to be changed from the viscosity as the viscosity changes, not the RPM of the spindle. So RPM must always be 20. So these are the difference between Newtonian and non-Newtonian system. Now let us understand how this non-Newtonian system is helping us in our formulation and in our processing aspects. Why a non-Newtonian system is better than a Newtonian system? So the non-Newtonian system is going to show you a yield value. Now what is a yield value? So a yield value is initial resistance to flow under applied stress. Okay. So what is happening here is applying the stress, you are increasing the force, but there is no flow. The rate is zero. This zero is very important. Up to this shear stress, the rate is zero. And only beyond this shear stress, you see a flow curve. There is no, then that is only then that the flow rate starts. So that is a very unique property of non-Newtonian system like Carbopol elastoplastic system, where up to a particular shear stress, there is no flow. And this shear stress is called as the yield index or the yield value of the system. And Carbopol polymers have a very high yield value compared to all the other natural gums which we have tested. So what is the practical application of yield value? How non-Newtonian systems are going to help you to have a high yield value, and how a yield value is going to help you in a suspension. So what is going to happen in a suspension? So practical application of yield value, suspension of a particle in a liquid. So unless the force of gravity, so you just imagine a bottle, and in a bottle there are suspended particles. So what the suspended particles are actually doing, they're putting stress on the system. They're putting stress on the system and telling the system, flow, show me some rate. So unless until the material below the particle flows away, the particle cannot go down. And unless until, because of the high yield value of the system, unless until the force of gravity operating on a suspended particle of a given mass exceeds the liquid's yield value, it will not descend. And this is the main principle why Carbopol polymer is able to provide permanent suspension. The suspension is not, the particle is not going to descend at all because the rate is zero. That is very important. Suspending ability of the vehicle, yield value is more important than viscosity. And here is an example which I want to share with you. We have prepared two gels. One is an aqueous gel with 6% xanthan gum, and another is aqueous gel with 0.6% Carbopol, 1/10 of Carbopol. And both the viscosities are now matched. They are having the same viscosity. And we suspended 3 spheres in them of various density and various size. So we suspended stainless steel sphere, a glass marble, and a plastic hollow sphere, plastic hollow ball in these dispersions. So in case of the xanthan gum, the stainless steel one came down and the plastic one has gone up. While in case of Carbopol, all the 3 spheres maintain the same position for 1 month. They did not change the position at all. So that is the beauty of Carbopol polymer, that they provide permanent suspension, which is not possible for viscous gel like xanthan gum. So by increasing the viscosity, what we are trying to do is we are only trying to delay the sedimentation. So instead of 1 centimeter per day, the particle might sediment 1 centimeter in 2 days. So instead of sedimenting in 1 month, the material might sediment in 2 months, but it will sediment for sure because the rate is not zero. Newtonian fluid with the slightest of shear is going to show a rate for sure. And therefore, the particle will descend, and because of high viscosity, again, it's become difficult to redisperse. Carbopol polymers have a high yield value at low viscosity. They don't need a high viscosity to provide a high yield value. And therefore, by virtue of the high yield value, there is no sedimentation at all. And even if something sediment, because of the low viscosity, it is very easy to redisperse. So this is the yield value important, understanding important. Many times suspensions are stabilized using colloidal systems, using ions, using flocculated systems and so on and so forth. But you will always find the supernatant solution getting separated, and with a compulsorily the suspension has to be mixed, and the mixing efficiency is going to change from patient to patient. So you don't know every time the same amount of drug is getting delivered or not. So those questions will not be there with carbopol containing dispersions, because they actually form a permanent suspension, and there will always the same amount of dose will be delivered every time the drug is dispensed from the bottle. The third important property of rheological property that we need to understand is thixotropy. Now, what is thixotropy? So when you apply stress on the system, there's deformation. So this is the deformation curve. And when you remove the stress quickly, so I bring the stress, I increase the stress, from here I drop the stress to 0. And then we see the viscosity changes, and there's a reformation. Okay, deformation and reformation. So what is happening? So in thixotropy, a decrease in viscosity under stress followed by gradual recovery when the stress is recovered. This effect is time dependent. So whenever there is a time dependence recovery, what you're going to see is this hysteresis loop. This loop is called as the hysteresis loop, because the reformation is slow and time dependent. A thixotropic system is shear thinning. The flow curve is less non-Newtonian when stress is rapidly removed and a hysteresis loop is created. So this is a typical thixotropic system. However, for most carbopol polymer they dispersion exhibit little or no thixotropy. So the up curve and the down curve are almost overlapping, and there is no hysteresis loop. So the recovery to the original viscosity is instantaneous, which is very important aspect to understand. So this viscoelastic behavior can be, so the dispersion can be sprayed, stirred, or pumped, but when the stress is ceased, recovery to the original viscosity is instantaneous. So this is basically the up curve and the down curve. They are almost overlapping. There is no hysteresis loop. Now this facility is going to help you in manufacturing. Imagine you have a 5,000 liter tank in which you prepare your product, and then you transfer it to a filling tank from where the quality assurance is going to withdraw the sample for final quality control check. If they withdraw the sample immediately after transfer, if it's a thixotropic system, the viscosity will not build up so quickly, and you might get wrong viscosity readings, and the viscosity will change over 1 hour, 2 hour, 3 hour, and probably after 24 hours it might take for the viscosity to completely come back to the original shape. While in case of carbopol, because it's a non-thixotropic system having very low thixotropy, the moment you transfer it will thin out, but moment it goes into the next tank, the viscosity builds up very quickly. So this is a facility during manufacturing. Also during usage, if you are squeezing a shampoo out of a bottle, you are applying the stress, and then by applying the stress, you are shear thinning the system, and you get a shampoo in your hand. But the moment you remove the stress, when there is no stress, the reformation must happen quickly. But in case of a thixotropic system, you will still find some drops of shampoo dropping from the bottle and on the floor, because you have removed your hand and messing up the your bathroom floor. But in case of carbopol, because of the low thixotropy, the moment you remove the hand, the shampoo will cut off very cleanly, and there will be no drops falling off. So this is the advantage of carbopol polymer: high viscosity at low intrusion level, high yield value at low viscosity, and no thixotropy, which is going to help you in the manufacturing and in the usage. So these are the three unique properties of carbopol that enable permanent suspension, enable uniform dosage to the patients, ease of administration, and ease of manufacturing. So, and why will carbopol polymer show this thixotropic behavior and all these yield value behavior? Why not the cellulosic gums, and why not the natural gums? The reason is very simple, because if you take any solid like sugar, okay, but the moment you dissolve sugar in water, now sugar becomes a liquid. It is no longer a solid. It behaves like a liquid. It loses its own state of matter. Anything that dissolves in water behaves like a water, like a Newtonian system. However, carbopol polymer, as I said, they're covalently crossing polymer, and they are swollen they form swollen gel particles. These are again particles behaving like a solid, like an elastic solid. And in this particle, the drug is trapped, and therefore It does not provide the high yield value because there's a solid inside a liquid, and that is what gives a non-Newtonian system. It is water soluble but water insoluble, while all the natural gums are water soluble, and what they only give is the viscous system. There is no elasticity, and it is mainly a Newtonian system, which is why we are only going to get a delayed sedimentation, but not a zero sedimentation and not a permanent suspension. So after having understood the theory behind the carbopol polymer, how to disperse the carbopol polymers in water. So basically, depending upon the batch size, the polymer concentration and availability of equipment, for small batch sizes, this is the mechanism. So you have to disperse the polymer, you have to form a slanting angle to your stirrer, form a vortex, and sprinkle the polymer so that each individual particle are wetted out properly, and then they are swollen. If you dump all the polymer together, the external surface is going to wet and not allowing the internal polymer to swell or wet, and you are going to get a lot of fish eyes. And if the dispersion is not properly dispersed, it is going to give problems moving forward in viscosity built-up and other aspects of the formulation. In case of production grades, large batch sizes, disperse the polymer using a reductor or a mechanical disperser. So these are the this is the reductor design where there is a Bernoulli's effect is created because of the water inlet, and the polymer is sucked inside and it is dispersed here, and it is only wetted here, and it is thrown. The dispersion is thrown out. It doesn't allow it to swell. Same is the mechanism here for the mechanical disperser, the Yatron disperser. Here, the powder is coming from one inlet and liquid is coming from the other inlet. There is a fast speed disperser which only wets the polymer without allowing it to swell, and the homogeneous product goes out. The beauty of this equipment is that every time the powder is going to get liquid, which is already not having any polymer. So when you're using a tank in which you're putting the polymer on top, initially there is no polymer in the tank. So the first powder, there is no polymer in the tank. But as you add next lots of powder, there is already some polymer in the tank and some viscosity is already built up. So your dispersion stirrer efficiency must be good enough to maintain the vortex till all the polymers are added, because the vortex is going to become smaller and smaller as the viscosity is going to grow, and which might create challenges during dispersion. So these are some of the aspects of formulation you must remember. And the one trick that you have to apply during scale up and during R&D is to measure the pH viscosity at every step. So I dispersed carbopol in water. What was the pH viscosity? I added ingredient A and mixed for 10 minutes. What was the pH viscosity? I added ingredient B, C, D, mixed for whatever minutes. What was the pH viscosity? Before neutralization, what was the pH viscosity? After neutralization, what was the pH viscosity? So all these stages must be noted. Number 1 point. Number 2 point, what mixing element should I use? So far as the polymer is only dispersed and not swollen, it is going to be a Newtonian flow, and a simple stirrer is going to be good enough to disperse the polymer. But as the polymer is going to swell during neutralization, the flow is going to turn from Newtonian to non-Newtonian, and therefore a propeller stirrer is not going to be useful, and therefore anchor stirrer or a paddle stirrer must be used during neutralization for uniform distribution of all the alkali and all the contents. Otherwise, just a propeller stirrer used during the neutralization is going to give variation from top, middle, bottom. So we have to understand the flow behavior, Newtonian to non-Newtonian, as we keep from unneutralized to neutralized, and therefore the type of stirrer also has to change. And typically a tank has a bottom stirrer for dispersing, and there's a top mounted stirrer for anchor stirrer for mixing. So these kind of a mechanism should be there in the tank during production scale. Otherwise, if you just have a bottom disperser, it's not going to be good enough. Suspension stabilization summary. So carbopol polymers are unique in formulating permanent suspension that are able to that are stable at low levels of polymer, wide range of viscosity profile, very high yield values. Yield value is more important than viscosity when determining suspending ability, as I stated. High yield value is necessary to create permanent suspension. Viscosity can only slow down the rate of settling, it cannot prevent it. Medium, highly crossing polymers have high yield value, and applications in suspension stabilization, emulsion stabilization, foam stabilization, and vertical cleaning. So I'm going to talk about the paracetamol suspension case study. Here, it's a simple formulation. So we disperse paracetamol in water and neutralize it with NaOH, and then drug is dispersed separately in water, added to the neutralized phase, and followed by the color and the flavor. So the simple mechanism, carbopol polymer phase, neutralization phase, drug phase. So drug is added after neutralization. This is very important. The order of ingredient addition becomes very important here. And here we have studied the centrifugation of the polymer of the suspension. So for both 240 milligrams and 120 milligram strengths, the viscosities of 120 milligram is 1250 and 240 is 1650. Slightly higher viscosity because the drug concentration is higher. Polymer is the same, but it did not show any sedimentation even after 15 minutes at 1500 RPM in centrifuge. So this is you don't see any supernatant liquid here. That is the beauty of the permanent suspension ability of carbopol polymers. Next is the raft study. As you know, the raft forming suspension preparation, which on contact with gastric acid generates carbonated gelatinous, raft. Raft forming mechanism involves generation of viscous cohesive semi-solid system in situ creation of micro reservoir of air and gas. Due to its low density and high content of pores, it tends to float. So when a gastric reflux offer occurs, this raft precedes. So it will go up, but not the gastric contents are not able to go into the esophagus. That's a simple mechanism. And basically the advantages of a raft system: effective in less than 3 minutes. The protective barrier is up to 4 hours. No hepatic mechanism, local action in the stomach, and another important aspect, drug control release property. So you can incorporate drugs also in a raft suspension for enhancing the gastric retention of the drug. These are some of the articles which are in which they are reported. There are no commercial products available, but this is something 505(b)(2) opportunity that you can think of. So ideally, the formulation of the system must meet the following requirement: maintain low density, high buoyancy, and if the drug is contained, it can be released in a controlled manner. So it's basically a complex scenario due to several ingredients and their interactions. And what carbopol as a formula, what we have done is we are providing this formulation and analytical and all the data as a package for fee. And we have high efficiency thickener, compliance with pharmacopoeia, formulation is BP compliant. You get a faster to launch product, and all the ingredients and performance and stability will be provided to you. So we can collaborate with you for a fee to provide all the information over this raft. The quality target profiles which we have understood for these are the concentration: sodium alginate, sodium bicarbonate, and calcium carbonate. The oral solid, the dosage form is oral, and obviously compendial parameters which were complied with alkalinity, relative density, and draft strength. We have studied this complete formulation for 6 months at 4075 and at 3075. Samples were evaluated for 10 seconds after shaking, and we have complied to all these 3 parameters for 6 months period, and these are the results. So pH remaining intact for 6 months, and also the raft strength above the limit of 7.5 mentioned in BP. So we consistently got a higher raft strength using only 1% carbopol as a suspending aid. So this is the video of the raft. As you can see, the 10 ml of the suspension is added to 0.1 normal hydrochloric acid in a volumetric flask. And this is not an edited video. It is just like that. And within seconds, you will see that the reaction takes place between the calcium carbonate, sodium bicarbonate, and the hydrochloric acid, forming the carbon dioxide, which is trapped inside the sodium alginate and carbopol gelatinous raft. And the raft, because of this low buoyancy, immediately starts to float on the surface of the liquid. And this is basically the gastric content. And this remains like that for a long time, 3 hours or 4 hours. And that's how you are able to provide good stability for the raft and in vivo effect. So we are providing starting point formula, faster to launch product, and carbopol polymer. So if all those who are interested in this particular formulation, please contact us for further discussions. Lastly, I'm going to talk about taste masking. Carbopol polymers have been used very extensively in taste masking. Basically, carbopol polymers as a cross-linked polymers of acrylic acid similar to weak cation exchange resins. So they are also kind of ion exchange resins which are weak cation exchange resins. May form complex with weakly basic drugs. The complex remains intact at salivary pH because basically taste masking is the reverse of enteric coating, where you do not want any release in the alkali and want everything to be released in the acid, which is exactly the reverse of enteric. So the complex remains intact in salivary pH and masking the taste of the bitter drugs and ionizes in the acidic environment of the stomach without impacting bioavailability. So this is a simple mechanism where we form the complex here, and once the complex goes into the stomach area, the free drug is released and the polymer is released. Carbopol polymer may function as weak cation exchange resins for taste masking of weakly basic drugs, preferably having pKa of about 7 to 10. So drugs which are having pKa between 7 to 10, you can form complex with Carbopol polymers. There are three aspects in complexation reaction which the formulator must look at. What is the exchange capacity? So exchange capacity is the drug loading ability of the polymer to take up exchangeable counter ions, referring to the number of ionic groups per unit weight of the volume. Carbopol polymers have a high exchange capacity because it is only 72. The acrylic acid is a very small molecule as compared to the sulfonic acid and the amine acid, categories of exchange resins which have a bulkier ionic substituent. Therefore, their exchange capacity is going to be lower. Carbopol exchange capacity is approximately 10 milliequivalent per gram. Crossing density, this is another aspect. The rate of ion exchange is influenced by the permeability of the solvent and solute through the pores of the polymer, whose number and size are influenced by the amount of cross-linking. If the polymer is not swelling quickly, then the reaction is going to be very slow or incomplete. The diffusion path length is also related to the size of the polymer particles. So Carbopol polymer particles are small, number one, high surface area, and they are also able to swell very quickly. So high surface area and high swelling ability and ensure that the reaction is quick and complete. And finally, once the complex is formed, how the complex is behaving in vivo. Functional groups of the ion exchange resin determine the type and strength of the ion. So if we have a very strong ionic interaction between the drug and the polymer, then it might lead to sustained release, and it might also trigger some regulatory concerns. While Carbopol polymers are weak ion exchange resins, so they release the drug. They do not release the drug in the salivary pH and release the drug in the gastric pH. So these are some of the three advantages of Carbopol polymer. As I said, high exchange capacity, high swelling capacity, and no ionization salivary pH, followed by the gastric environment, processing versatility. These are some of the advantages of using Carbopol polymers, in taste masking. However, there are limitations also. We cannot use it for all the APIs, and it is not going to form a film as such. So these are some of the negative effects or the limitations. The mechanism or the manufacturing processes is a precipitation, slurry, and wet granulation. All of them can be adopted. So in case of precipitation, you can disperse Carbopol and the drug in ethanolic solution, and then add the dispersion to water to precipitate the complex. Or you can prepare the slurry of Carbopol and drug in solvent like acetone. You can put the drug and Carbopol in water, and because acetone is miscible with water, you can make a slurry of that to have the reaction, and then the solvent can be removed by evaporation and or centrifugation, and thereby the precipitating or the forming the complex. Third is the wet granulation, simple granulation using Carbopol and using water as a granulating liquid. Also, people have been able to form the complex. These are all the literature which are listed in the various patents and articles, and we have done an extensive survey of all the literature and articles of taste masking with Carbopol, and we should be able to help any formulator to formulate a taste mask product using Carbopol. So two processes which are there for the Abbott patent using clarithromycin, granulation, and extrusion. So these are the two patents which are mentioned. And they are simple mechanisms. So granulation, then drying and combination with film coating, or extrusion and drying and combination with film coating. The postulated mechanism of taste masking is ionic attraction between the amino group and macrolide antibiotics and the carboxyl group of the carbomer, and the gel properties of the carbomer. These are the two postulated mechanisms as mentioned in the patent. So this was all about the applications of Carbopol polymer. So we started with the introduction to the pharmaceutical ingredients as such. Then we talked about the chemistry part of Carbopol, the table of Carbopol polymers. Then we looked at the swelling mechanism of Carbopol polymers. And then we also looked at the rheological consideration, processing consideration. And we have looked at the case studies, paracetamol suspension, and the RAF forming suspension. And at the end, we have also studied the taste masking applications of Carbopol polymer, for which Carbopol has been extensively used globally. Some examples of commercial formulations containing Carbopol polymer. Clarithromycin is Biaxine, obviously contains carbomers. Viramun contains carbomer. Gaviscon contains carbomer, which is the RAF forming suspension. Nystatin, lidocaine, so on and so forth. The examples, of course, there are paracetamol suspension containing Carbopol polymer, obviously, but they are in different geographies where probably on the label they don't mention the excipient, so we are not able to, because this is not in the public knowledge, so we are not able to talk about it. But apart from these, we are aware about several other formulations which are commercialized using Carbopol polymers globally. And if you are interested, we'll be able to discuss more details with you on one-on-one basis. Concluding my today's discussion, carbopol polymers are highly efficient rheology modifier at low usage level. Ideal flowability for formulations handling, spray, pump, spread, or pour. High yield value and efficient microgel formulation allows providing stable, robust, permanent suspension. Temperature resistance with minimal effect. You can actually do cold processing of the polymer. There is no need to heat the polymer because of the low bioburden. That is another advantage of carbopol. Bioavailability enhancement via excellent mucoadhesion properties, taste masking, and then these polymers are manufactured under GMP certified facilities and have established DMFs, and we provide all the regulatory database to all the customers. I will now hand over the dais to my colleague Vijay Ahire, who is going to take you through the other aspects of today's webinar. Vijay, you are.
Yeah. Thank you, Kedar. Thank you for the very informative session. Just to highlight about the our channel partners, our distributors, different regions. So in India, our authorized distributor is Arihant Inochem. You can get in touch with Dr. Chitra. They are long-time partners of Lubrizol in India. In Bangladesh Maritime Enterprises, MEPL, properly known as, you can get in touch with Dildar. And in Morgan Chemicals for the Pakistan area. Kedar, next. So for any for Saudi Arabia, Al-Azaz Chemicals, long-standing partner of Lubrizol Life Sciences there. Shoaib Afroz is our contact person. In United Arab Emirates and Oman area, Al-Shihab Al-Thiabi, Ahmad Hussein is the contact person. In Jordan, Actico is the contact person. And for European countries and for US, IMCD is our distributor. And contact person from Lubrizol is Dr. Pavel. And you can get in touch with any IMCD representative also for any of your queries in terms of technical queries, sample request. We'll be happy to help. In India, you can contact me or any Arihant representative. Me, Dr. Pankaj will be available to answer any of your questions. So next, we will switch over to the question and answer session. We had a lot of questions, a lot of interesting interaction, lot of insight provided by Kedar that had led to so many questions which we could answer, and there are some questions where we require Kedar's help to get more answers. So one of the question is whether thixotropic behavior is desirable in suspension or not.
So yeah, thixotropic behavior, basically it is not really desirable, because a thixotropic behavior means what? So you are basically, when you are doing manufacturing and you are transferring from one tank to another tank, if it's a very highly thixotropic system, the viscosity built up is going to be very slow, and you might see changes in viscosity after 1 hour, 2 hours, etc. That is one aspect of thixotropic behavior. Second aspect of thixotropic behavior is that, suppose you are shaking the bottle. Okay, you're shaking the bottle, and by way of shaking the bottle, there is a shear thinning. Then when you stop shaking the bottle, okay, if the viscosity doesn't build up quickly, because of the low viscosity, because of shaking, you might cite enhanced sedimentation if it's a thixotropic material, because the viscosity is not building quickly. So these are some of the aspects that a highly thixotropic material is not really advantageous, because when you shake it, it deforms, and it remains in the deformed state in the bottle, and because the viscosity is not building quickly, it will lead to enhanced sedimentation. So it is kind of counterproductive. So thixotropic system are useful when, for example, you're doing painting. Okay, you apply paint, you are applying the shear, right? But when you remove the shear, if it quickly contracts, then the spreading is not happening uniformly. There you need a thixotropic system, but the spreading has to be uniform. So somewhere you need thixotropic system, but in case of formulations, pharmaceutical product, probably a thixotropic system is not desired. Vijay, you are muted.
Yeah, sorry. Yes. The next question is there any way to understand complete hydration of polymer before neutralization?
Yes, this is a very interesting, very question, and these are the most challenging issues we have seen people facing. When can I ensure that the hydration is complete? Now, when you standardize your formulation in R&D, so it is important that you check the pH viscosity at every stage, because when the polymer is hydrated properly, it will also build up the viscosity also. An unhydrated polymer will show lower viscosity, okay, even in unutilized form. So you can always measure the pH viscosity of the dispersion before neutralization as a standard practice. So that will reveal if there is a lower viscosity than what you have seen in R&D batches, then it's a trigger for you that some polymer is not properly dispersed, already sticking around to the tank somewhere or to the stirrer somewhere, and that is why we are not getting that viscosity. So that is an important criteria to understand properly dispersed polymer. Another test you can do is obviously you can just take a portion of the liquid and pass it through 40 mesh screen, and check if there are some grubs or undispersed particles which can be seen on the screen. Typically, a properly hydrated dispersion should be able to pass through 20 mesh screen. If there are big chunks, they'll be retained over the screen. So that's a quick fix test you can do. So these are some of the tests, and basically measuring the pH viscosity, visual inspection. These are going to tell you whether the polymer is properly dispersed or not. And before the polymer is properly dispersed, do not proceed ahead. We do not recommend overnight soaking. We do not recommend hot water for dispersion. These are some of the things people have been doing. When you use hot water, what's going to happen is in the tank, there are going to be vapors. And when you're putting the polymer on the top, the polymer is going to catch those vapors and form the lumps before it falls in the water. So always disperse polymer at room temperature, always form a vortex, and the efficiency of the stirrer must be such that unless until all the polymer is added, the vortex must be there. So there has to be a facility to increase the increase the RPM of the stirrer as the viscosity built up, so as to maintain the vortex. Once you are able to maintain the vortex till the end of the polymer addition, and vortex remains during the dispersion stage, I think that is the best way of ensuring complete dispersion. So anytime you're taking more than 45 minutes to 1 hour for dispersing carbopol polymers, then something is wrong with the dispersion. It should not take more than 45 minutes to 1 hour to disperse the carbopol polymer, and do because excessive mixing, excessive soaking, etc., are going to give a lot variability and other issues. So please ensure that your stirring efficiency is very good and you are able to disperse all the polymer in 45 minutes.
So on the same line, you already answered that question. Can you disperse in warm water 60 to 90 degrees Celsius?
Yeah, so that is not recommended. Always you should take room temperature water, and after having dispersed, you can heat it. Carbopol polymers are autoclaved in ophthalmic products, and there also we always tell autoclave the unneutralized polymer. Okay, so you can heat it after dispersing, but do not put polymer in hot water.
Right.
You are also muted, Pankaj.
So microgel viscosity measurement is the question.
So the viscosity, as I said, there is macro viscosity and a micro viscosity. Okay, macro viscosity is the overall viscosity, what we measured with Brookfield, and there is a micro viscosity. So there are rheological, actually methods available in cone and plate viscometer, where we can actually measure the micro and the micro viscosity. So those methods are available, so we can discuss that on a one-on-one basis.
So Kedar, next question is, does separation in a suspension means that carbopol hasn't reached a plateau region? How to avoid any separation in the future?
Now, separation, we have to understand in a different terms. What do you mean by separation? So if there is a supernatant liquid and the other contents are sedimenting down, that is one kind of separation, where the supernatant liquid is only the syrup or whatever it is. So this kind of a sedimentation, if it is happening, then that probably should not be seen in case of carbopol polymer dispersion. Okay, so if you're using a carbopol for a suspending agent, and despite that, if you see a sedimentation happening, that means this is not a optimized formulation. Probably the swelling has not happened uniformly. Probably the critical concentration, overlap concentration has not reached. The viscosity is not built up correctly, or some of the other issues are there. If a properly formulated suspension is there, typically it should not show any separation. Of course, I mean, we have to also understand that there are certain, API which are very dense. For example, if you're using iron polymaltose as an API, and iron is having a very high density, and then if you want to prepare a permanent suspension, that can be a little bit of a challenge. But typically, all the APIs having density 0.5, 0.6, tap density, those typically should not be a problem. If its density goes up more than 1.5, there can be more challenges there. So it's a case-to-case phenomena. When you say separation is happening, we need to really deep dive into what was the API, what are the density of the API, what is the other aspects of suspension, and then only understand what is the supernatant liquid. It is the plain liquid, or some components are coming out, some components are in the liquid. Those studies have to be done. Centrifugation is one study which you can do actually, which is typically not all these. The personal care guys do a lot of centrifugation studies, and the study so 1500 RPM gives 400 G, 400 times the gravitational force, depending upon the diameter of the your centrifuge, or the radius of the centrifuge. So you can calculate the radius of the centrifuge and the G, and accordingly design whether you want to 15 minutes 1500 RPM, 15 minutes 1000 RPM, and actually do the sedimentation study to get a perfect idea what's happening in the suspension on a long-term basis.
So Kedar, one question from Niranjan regarding any chances of drop in viscosity with carbopol plus SLS?
Yes, sodium lauryl sulfate is a salt. Sodium lauryl sulfate is alkaline in nature. So it's a case-to-case specific phenomena. So rather than ionic surfactant, maybe you can choose Twin 80 or Chemophore, which are non-ionic, which may be better stabilizers. So I would rather switch to non-ionic surfactants rather than the ionic ones. So that is my choice.
We'll take the last question because there are so many questions, and we will answer all the questions on email after the webinar. Last question, Pankaj.
So there is this question, they are making a ready-to-use suspension, but it has
Yes.
shown retarded Tmax as compared to the tablet formulation. However, the AUC is matching. So
Mhm.
what would you suggest?
Okay. So, so there's a reduction in the absorption in vivo. Okay. Now, what we have to understand is they have to do the resolutions testing in vitro, in fasting, fed, and all those media for suspension also. So when you are doing the dissolution test for suspension, so basically properly mix the suspension, and you have to keep this after mixing the suspension bottle. You have to keep it standstill. If you mix it for too long a time, as I said, there's a shear thinning. Okay, and immediately if you withdraw sample and put in a dissolution machine, you are already putting a shear thin suspension for dissolution, and which might give a correct release. But if you shake the bottle, keep it for 5 minutes, and then withdraw the sample and then put in a dissolution machine, probably the viscosity has built up, and there probably you might get a better understanding of the release profile. So these are some of the subtle aspects we have to bear in mind. Now, suspension is the suspension taken like that, or is the suspension taken with water? So what is the recommendation that you provide to the patient? He's taking the suspension and not taking anything else, or he's taking the suspension with water, with a glass of water. I would recommend to take a suspension with a glass of water, like a tablet, and probably you might get similar release performance. So because suspension might otherwise stick to the esophagus, it might not go to the stomach, and which could be the reason for enhanced Tmax. The tablet goes inside directly, and that could be one of the reasons if the suspension is not taken with a glass of water, while a tablet is taken with a glass of water. So these are some of the subtle aspects of dosing, especially when you're comparing apple to apple. We have to really go to that level. I believe so.
So right, that was the last question. We will answer all questions on email to individually, and we'll share the recording to all the attendees. Thank you very much for your response, for attending the webinar. Take care and stay safe. Thank you.
Thank you very much to all the participants for sparing your time, and I hope it was worth the time spent. Thank you very much.